Hello, and welcome back to DFT's Dungeon. I'm Daniel Terry, and in this video, I'm finally going to do it, guys. I'm going to talk about every Norma Jean album in one video.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
As if I haven't posted enough Norma Jean related stuff on the channel already. The thing is, though, Norma Jean is such an interesting band to me because of how different all of their records actually are from one another.
Possibilities are endless.
They're the kind of band that you could fall out of touch with for several years, and then whenever you jump back in, you might be really confused about what band you're even listening to. But there is a little bit of familiarity, which we'll kind of get into whenever I get to the end of this marathon of a video. Now, this isn't just me harping on the band for constantly changing members like a lot of people do, because, like, I get it. My other favorite band is Zayo, so trust me, if anybody gets it, I get it. When a band runs for this long, for multiple decades, people are going to come and go. But I think in Norma Jean's case, this band as an entity has greatly benefited from regular injections of fresh blood. Okay, so that's kind of gross, right? I got a little too into that. It's almost Halloween, forgive me. But I've probably done a long enough intro for what is shaping up to be a longer video, but I do want to take a couple of seconds to shout out Fox & Sons Coffee, who has been kind enough to sponsor my YouTube channel. These guys are a small family-run business who sell incredible coffee that I drink every single morning. I have a link to their store in my video description, so if you decide to support them by buying some coffee, make sure to use coupon code DFT at checkout for a discount on orders of $35 or more. So with that out of the way, let's get into this discography. Before Norma Jean was Norma Jean, they were Luti Kriss, as a lot of you guys pointed out in my comments whenever I said that I was making a Norma Jean video next. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about the origins of the band because I literally already did that in an older video of mine. So, you know, if you want it totally chronological, pause this video, go watch that one, and then come back and watch this one. And if you actually did that, comment down below that you did that, and don't lie because I will be able to tell that you're lying. So let's keep the band history a little bit shorter here. Luti Kriss was a band that was formed by close friends in Douglasville, Georgia in 1997. And they started off like any other rock and metal band, you know, probably playing covers in the garage. But all of these guys ended up attending a Christian youth group event separately from one another, but collectively they decided that they wanted to make Luti Kriss into a Christian metal band. And I'll get into how they sounded back then in the next segment, but for the time being, let's just say they played a lot of shows. They honed their craft. They got better at writing songs to the point where they caught the attention of Pluto Records, who had them make a split CD with another up-and-coming aggressive Christian band called Travail. Travail is awesome. I need to make a Travail video. But the Luti Kriss portion of that split CD is now referred to as 2000, the 5 EP. The 5 EP is an interesting listen for sure, because of course I heard it a long time after hearing Norma Jean, because I became a fan of Norma Jean, not of Luti Kriss, right? So I had to go back in time. So in that sense, the first time that I heard this, I was completely underwhelmed, and this was unrecognizable as the same band. But starting out, Luti Kriss sounded like an aggressive nu metal band, like a band that mostly screamed instead of sang. But, you know, they did throw a lot of nu metal things in there, like turntables and rapping and screaming and whispering and these super whiny, clean vocals. And I'm really not trying to knock it, but it is one of those things where, like, if you've been in a band, you all remember what your first, like, real recording was. And I feel like it's probably that way for the guys that were in the band at this time. It's a very humble beginning for the band because it's just weird nu metal riffs that are kind of jutting in and out of these weirdly composed songs. But occasionally they will show tiny hints of the chaotic sound that they would later become known for. Songs like Body of God and I Covenant, I'm Yours showcased the band's early obsession with combining quiet parts and loud parts, and slower and speedier riffs. They were just trying to see how far they could push contrasts, which was going to be really important later on in the band's career. But I got to give the band a shout out for representing my boy Eeyore on the third song. Luti Kriss in 2000, you guys knew what was up. Eeyore is the absolute best. All in all, 5 EP is an interesting little look at the band's early days, but is probably not an amazing place for you to start off listening to the band, because trust me, it just gets better from here. 1 year later, we got 2001, Throwing Myself. Throwing Myself is like the absolutely perfect follow-up to the 5 EP because it improves on absolutely everything that was wrong with the 5 EP. No more turntables, no more attempted rapping. Throwing Myself has significantly beefed up the band's level of aggression, and I think part of that is because it was professionally recorded and was released on the band's new label, Solid State Records. And when I reviewed this album by itself on the channel earlier this year, I was struck by how this album relies more heavily on slow build type of songs instead of just being pure chaos like they would be later on in their career. Because I really like the slow burn of songs like Blacksmith, Patiently Philadelphia, Petty Larson. Because like they're focused on creating this atmosphere that would perfectly contrast the faster and more aggressive songs like Light Blue Collar and The Annihilation. And the only complaint that I have on this record is that it's mixed very loudly, you know, probably like I am on this YouTube video, to the point where it seems like it's clipping in places, but like it's kind of a pretty small nitpick. Because overall, this record is super exciting because it creates this like constant sense of anticipation in the listener that then leads to chaotic surprises. Like I feel like it always pays off. It expects a little bit more from the listener, and it's not so much about instant gratification, but we would eventually be gratified by 2002, Bless the Martyr, and Kiss the Child. Okay, so Bless the Martyr and Kiss the Child. I mean, much like Throwing Myself, I feel compelled to tell you that I have also made a 45-minute video talking about only that album in great detail. So with that in mind, let's talk about it some more.
Daddy, chill.
There's no other way to say it. This album, along with Zayo's Blood and Fire and Living Sacrifices Reborn, these albums all completely rewrote my brain. It rewrote how I process music. And this album changed a lot of things for me in a lot of other ways too. So like obviously, the first major evolution of the band on this record was the band's name. And you may have noticed that Luti Kriss sounds a lot like a rapper that's also called Luti Kriss. I mean, they spelled it differently, but, you know, when you're saying it, it sounds the same unless we are expected to refer to this band as Luti Kriss. But I don't know what the story is there. I mean, I've heard rumors that the band was forced to change their name, but that doesn't really pass the smell test to me. I feel like they probably changed it voluntarily to avoid confusion, but I don't know that for sure. Let me know in the comments if you actually know what the real scoop is with that. And the band changed their name to Norma Jean, which was based on Marilyn Monroe's real name. But then I've also heard that they changed the name to Norma Jean because it translates to patterns of God's grace or God's mercy and grace. I don't know. Like there's so much lore with the early Norma Jean. And so it's really hard to tell what's real or not. But I'm going to try to keep it as factual as I can going forward in the video. The other big change is that the band completely dropped the more melodic and nu metal sound found on their older material, and they exchanged it for a chaotic mathcore sound. From the first 10 seconds of the album, you can tell that this is a totally different beast than Throwing Myself was. Fast-paced, dissonance-soaked riffs and loud, roomy drums are the definition of this record, and to top it off, you have vocals that can only really be described as an assault. Josh's screams have dipped into more of a guttural and deeper register than before. The vocals sound like they were recorded into like a hand microphone run through a mic'd guitar amp, which adds just the right amount of distortion to his voice. The riffs are massive, the breakdowns are world-shattering, and there's a reason why this is largely considered to be one of the most classic albums of the early 2000s metalcore scene. The song names are exceptionally long and complicated, and it's quirky and it's super fun, and so many bands would copy it after this. And while it would be impossible for me to actually pick a list of favorite songs on this album, or really any of these albums, for the sake of the video format, I will attempt to do so anyway. And those songs would be The Entire World Is Counting on Me and They Don't Even Know It, The Shotgun Message, The Human Face Divine, and of course, the ultimate Norma Jean show closer of all time, Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste. But one really notable song on this album that I don't want to miss is the 15-minute opus, Pretty Soon, I Don't Know What, But Something Is Gonna Happen. Because it showcases even then that the band was wanting to push their musical range much further than what their sound would imply. And this was the album that pushed Norma Jean to the forefront of scene kids' minds in 2002. And they backed it up with insanely chaotic live performances. And while things seem to really be looking up for Norma Jean at this point in their career, for reasons that seem somewhat random even today, their singer Josh decided to leave the band. And listen, I've just been saying Josh because I don't know if it's pronounced Skogan or Skogan. And again, I'm sure you guys are going to let me know in the comments. But this was a really abrupt choice, and it's pretty obvious that there was no plan B for this, because when he left, it kind of left the band in a lurch. But thankfully for us, they persevered and they kept touring. Sometimes with this fill-in vocalist named Brad Norris. And other times they would play instrumentally and they'd let people from the crowd just jump up and sing the songs. And I remember there being so much anticipation for who the band was going to eventually select as their permanent vocalist. I had a buddy named Kurt who went and saw the band during this era, and I remember him coming back to school and being like, dude, they've got this new guy named Corey singing, and he's totally awesome. Man, everything's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay, Norma Jean. It's going to be okay. And he couldn't have been more right, because it wouldn't be very long before we got 2005, Oh God, The Aftermath. So by this new guy, Corey, he meant Corey Brandon, or Corey Putman, who used to sing in another hardcore band called Esocaris. It's another band that I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but I do know that they used to be called Elliot before they were Esocaris. They changed their name too. So Corey was already an expert in being in a band that started off with one name and then decided to change it to something else. Because basically, who else are you going to call, right? The guy's the perfect man for the job. And if you were worried that Norma Jean was going to change a whole lot between this album and Bless the Martyr, well, you'd be totally right. It was a valid fear, but also not. Because once you listen to the album, you realize you didn't really have anything to be worried about in the first place. And that's because Oh God, The Aftermath hits with the same blunt force trauma that you would expect from Norma Jean at this point in their career. Song names are quirky and fun, and on this album they have a new gimmick, which is that they're going to take two words and smash them together, but then they didn't fully commit to the bit because the songs have additional titles after the two-word combos. But that was okay, because this album delivers banger after banger after banger. Some of my favorites include Bayonet Work, Vultures in Vivid Color, Lie Arsenic, Creating a Universe of Discourse, and Pretend Ever, in reference to a sinking ship. But one song that really sets itself apart is the seventh song, Disconnecti, The Faithful Vampire. It is an absolute monster of a song, clocking in at 10 minutes. And while it's really heavy, it definitely has more of a melodic identity to it. And it's kind of the first glimpse at what this new Norma Jean was going to be capable of in the future. It was cool hearing the band adding little hints of melody and even some actual melodic singing in places. And I think even back in 2005, they wanted to start finding their own musical identity, because as classic as these first two Norma Jean albums are, their sound at the time was still kind of borrowed from other bands. More specifically, Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child is heavily influenced by Coalesce's 1997 album, Functioning on Impatience. It's not a direct ripoff by any means, but you can definitely hear the influence. And alternatively, on Oh God, the Aftermath, there's a similar level of influence on the music and vocals to Botch's 1999 album, We Are the Romans. But even though they were clearly wearing those influences on their sleeves, you can definitely hear them trying really hard to push forward with their sound. There was creativity just bubbling up constantly on this record. And because I didn't really know what they were going to do next, I was sort of foaming at the mouth to hear their next record, which I got pretty quickly with 2006 Redeemer. Now, thankfully, we didn't have to wait nearly as long between Oh God, the Aftermath and Redeemer as we did between Bless the Martyr and Oh God, the Aftermath. Redeemer dropped on September 12th, 2006, just 1.5 years after Oh God, the Aftermath. And I was a card-carrying member of the Norma Jean cult at this point. So you'd better believe that I'd bought this album day one. And this album still ranks as my favorite album cover, featuring a bird biting the finger of a screaming child.
Stop it. Get some help.
One huge elephant in the room with Redeemer is that it was produced by Ross Robinson, who was a producer for bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit, Sepultura, Glassjaw, At the Drive-In, Slipknot, and probably a whole bunch of other bands that you've definitely heard of. And if you don't know much about Ross, let's just say that he's infamous for doing everything in his power to push a band to their breaking point in order to get them to deliver the most authentic version of themselves on the album. And honestly, that is exactly what we got on Redeemer. Redeemer takes what the Norma Jean sound had been up to that point and blends it into something new, but also familiar sounding. And we're kind of eased into it as the listener. On the first song, A Grand Scene for a Color Film, you may not really think anything's different. It's chaotic, it's noisy, like we expect from Norma Jean. Like, it gives us what we want. And there's a great shoutable breakdown at the end. Like, you feel good, right? And then you start realizing that Blueprints for Future Homes is getting stuck in your head. Yeah, well, that's what I said. You can't get rid of it. It's heavy, it's chaotic, but it's catchy. And you start realizing that Corey's vocals have shifted a little bit on this record too. He's showing much greater vocal range than he did on Oh God, the Aftermath. You start noticing all these like melodic flourishes in the riffs that you didn't notice the first time, right? Things start getting really, really melodic on A Small Spark versus A Great Forest. And then the band kind of backs off on that, right? And they step back more into their familiar sound with the next two songs. But I want to give a special shout out to The End of All Things Will Be Televised. That is still one of my favorite Norma Jean songs of all time. But Songs Sound Much Sadder delivers an actual chorus that got stuck in my head for weeks back in the day. And to contrast that, you have the longest lasting statement, which is another all-time Norma Jean song for me. And that song sounds like it honestly could have been on Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child. Like it's almost perfect in that way. And I could go on and on about every song on this album, but the point is that Norma Jean was growing here, and they were trying to keep up the intensity of their previous releases while still stuffing in new elements that might help them appeal to a wider audience. When you spend most of your year touring, it would be really nice to be able to sell records to more than one specific type of listener, right? And I think that they did an amazing job here of keeping old fans on board while attracting new fans. And I was absolutely stoked to see what the band was going to do next. But it caught me off guard because let's just say what they did end up doing next was a little bit confusing for me. 2008, The Anti-Mother. You know, there's kind of a familiar story that I see with a lot of heavy bands that I got into when I was younger. Like, they start off kind of blowing my mind with like Extremity, and they do really well for a while. And eventually, though, they kind of start getting softer and softer, and they get more popular and more popular. And then you'd see a music video, you know, of theirs, and they're singing the whole time. And before you know it, you don't even recognize the band anymore. And that's originally what I thought Norma Jean was doing on The Anti-Mother. It took me a long time, like years, to like really adjust to what was going on here. And what am I talking about, right? Well, in contrast to previous Norma Jean albums, the Anti-Mother is a slower paced record, and it's got a lot of singing on it and a lot less screaming. So there's less panic chords and more choruses. It's every teenage metal fan's worst nightmare. But it's worth noting that this album was also produced by Ross Robinson, and it features a new drummer named Chris Rains, who was in another band called Spitfire, who I think is also a really, really cool, like chaotic, heavy band from that scene. The only song that even sounds like classic Norma Jean on this album is the song Birth of the Anti-Mother, and it's actually really cool. They really knocked it out of the park with that song. But the rest of the songs are mostly uncharted territory for Norma Jean. The band actually pulled in some fairly well-known musicians to collaborate with them on writing some of these songs too. So they had Chino Moreno from Deftones, Paige Hamilton from Helmet, and Cove Reber from Seosin. And what we get with the Anti-Mother is more of a dirty hard rock and metal sound that sometimes borders on metalcore. Songs like Self-Employed Chemist, Robots 3, Human Zero, Surrender Your Sons, and Murphy Was an Optimist, have a more gritty hard rock sound and song structure, and they're contrasted by slower and sludgier songs like Viper, Snakes, and Actors, and the incredibly dark and heavy Death of the Anti-Mother. But the crowning achievement on this album for me is the closing song, And There Will Be a Swarm of Hornets. This is a super epic song and was the first time that I really felt like Norma Jean was going to start putting a super epic closer on every single album. And this one does not disappoint at all. It's a slow build. It contains a lot of the same elements that we've heard on the record up to this point, but then it all sort of culminates in an absolutely visceral breakdown. And I still love it. I still get emotional when I listen to that song. But now that I'm an old dude, I really, really actually love the Anti-Mother, because I realized that if the band had wanted to soften up and gain more fans, this really wouldn't have been the way to do it. What they did here, instead of going pop or whatever, right, or rock, they were pushing their musical abilities. They were seeing how much range Norma Jean as a band actually had. And they did that until they had produced something that was genuinely original. There's no rock or metal albums that sound like the Anti-Mother. I mean, I feel the process taught this band a lot of lessons about where they were going to be able to go in the future. And while some fans may not have liked it, I personally feel that without this record, we would not have gotten some of the incredible works of art that I'm going to be talking about more in a couple of minutes. In 2009, the band actually decided to leave their longtime label, Solid State Records, to sign with another label called Razor and Tie. And it was on this new label that they would write and release 2010's Meridional. You know, it's funny, I used to tell people when I was talking about Norma Jean that the Anti-Mother was like the start of atmospheric Norma Jean, right? And while it was a joke, it's absolutely the truth. This was where Norma Jean really started caring about the atmosphere and vibe of their albums more so than just the music. And it couldn't be more true on Meridional. The first thing that you might notice about this record, though, is that Norma Jean has redirected their focus back to their more heavy, like, metalcore sound. So it incorporates a lot of, like, panic chords, like heavy stuff, like really chaotic songs, right? So you've got songs like Bastardizer, I found a better way. I found a better way. Blood Burner, and the super heavy Anthem of the Angry Brides. You're not getting under my skin. You're not getting, which keeps things as aggressive as possible. But then the album opener, Leaderless and Self-Enlisted, also adds in this kind of melodic vocal flourish. And it creates an actual chorus amidst the chaos, and they're going to get really good at this. The song Deathbed Atheist is a really dark and like vibier song, and is a little bit more like something you would have heard on the Anti-Mother. because it builds off these like slower melodic elements, but then it accentuates them perfectly with like really heavy moments on that song. It's really good. There's a reason that's such a loved Norma Jean song, why it was such a big single. And in a lot of ways, Meridional mostly resembles Redeemer, I think, because it really blends the brutality of the past with the melody that they were just discovering. But unlike Redeemer, like that record is great and classic, but I do think that this record is better from like a songwriting maturity standpoint. Like the choruses hit better, the melodic elements are handled better, the band goes a lot further with them in places. And I think that's how we got really cool songs like A Media Friendly Turn for the Worse, High Noise, Low Output, and the people that surround you on a regular basis. And it just shows how they've mastered combining darker elements with lighter elements while still staying tonally consistent with the other songs. And as for the atmosphere I mentioned earlier, we get some purely atmospheric songs too. One of them is called Septentrional. I probably didn't pronounce that right, or I spelled it wrong in my script or something. This song is very beautiful, and it's almost pure atmosphere, and I love it. And by contrast, the other song is called Occidental, which sounds like something that's out of my nightmares. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
On display in the shape of an ornament.
It freaks me out. Like, I can't, this is one of those records I can't listen to whenever I'm falling asleep, because they have weird elements that like will sort of creep up on you if you're not paying attention. So getting back on the track of beautiful songs, though, one song I have to mention is Falling from the Sky, Day 7, which is one of the most beautiful songs that Norma Jean has ever written.
Do you really think all the saints are just lying?
We would have just never gotten a song like this if the band hadn't done what they did on The Anti-Mother. This is like a direct result of that innovation. And lastly on this record is a song called Innocent Bystanders United. And it's another epic, long Norma Jean album closer. And this one combines a lot of different atmospheric elements. It combines kind of random noise, ambiance, a little bit of melody, more melodic parts, and lots of sound clips. And one of the sound clips is actually from the Jonestown Death Tape, which makes this a very, very dark and creepy sort of record. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't want to wake up and hear Jim Jones talking in my headphones. When Meridional came out, it completely blew away my expectations of what a Norma Jean album could be. Like, sure, it was a return to form for the band, but it was so much more than that. And I feel like Norma Jean could absolutely do no wrong at this point, which is why I was so excited whenever they released 2013's Wrongdoers. It's wild to think that when I first started listening to Norma Jean, I was 16. And in 2013, I was 27, and I was still listening to Norma Jean. And at that time, I'd been working as a cable installer, and I remember like driving around all day. I didn't work near a major city, so I was always driving through like trailer parks and like not ghost towns, but like towns where there just wasn't a lot of activity. Like the kind of town where you would like drive through Main Street in the middle of the day and nobody would be around. So like you would really feel like you were in a ghost town. What does that have to do with Wrongdoers? Well, it's because when I got that CD, that was the soundtrack to all of that. My entire career in cable, I was listening to this Norma Jean album. When I listen to it now, I still have a lot of those same memories. What is Wrongdoers like? In a lot of ways, Wrongdoers is similar to the previous album, Meridional, except that it sounds a lot grittier and almost like sun faded. This album contains blistering, chaotic bangers like The Potter Has No Hands, Neck and the Hemp, and If You Got It at 5, You Got It at 50, which has a music video that features tons of people puking milk into a swimming pool, and no, I am not making that up. But it also contains some incredibly catchy songs like Sordid Mouth, Fire Eyes, the title track Wrongdoers, and Triffids.
So trust us with your life. Nothing but the end of the world is coming.
The Norma Jean chorus game on this album is so good. These are some of the most memorable Norma Jean choruses that I had ever heard up to that moment. There's also a creepy atmospheric track in this album called After Our Animals, which is relaxing and terrifying all at the same time.
You are warm, loved, and comfortable.
And this album has basically everything that the previous album had, but I feel like it takes it further in every way. The heavier songs are heavier and they're more on par with classic Norma Jean, but on each release, they just get so much better at combining these elements together and making them all make sense. My favorite song of the bunch, though, is the closer, Sun Dies, Blood Moon, because at this point, I'm a pretty big sucker for epic Norma Jean closing tracks. This song really hits me hard, and I always think about it when I'm driving past abandoned houses or really anywhere in the decaying infrastructure of America. Like if I see pictures of an old ghost town, I'm thinking about this song because this song just has this very end of the world vibe to it.
Have no fear, open your eyes.
It's epic and it's amazing, and it ends really strong with Corey screaming, "I will storm the gates of hell. I will kill the Queen of Death herself." It's so good. It's so Norma Jean. And when Wrongdoers came out, I called it even back then a perfect album. And I think that is still true a lot of the time. And this was, in my opinion, the result of all of the musical exploration that the band had done since Redeemer. And I didn't think it could be topped. But 3 years later, we got 2016 Polar Similar. You know, expectations are kind of an interesting thing. When the band put out what was basically a perfect album with Wrongdoers, I'd kind of learned to temper my expectation a little bit, right? Just because a band puts out a perfect record, you know, expecting them to put out a second perfect record in a row is like expecting your favorite baseball team to win the World Series 2 years in a row, right? So even if Polar Similar was bad, it was probably going to be good enough anyway, right? But like, honestly, that was a lot of mental gymnastics on my part because my expectations were completely blown away again. See, Norma Jean has never been a band who shows signs of settling on one thing, right? One sound. Once they figure something out and they nail it, they move on to something else. And this album marks the return of Norma Jean to Solid State Records. Polar Similar is a super wacky record. And I mean that in the best way possible. It starts off with another slow builder song, kind of similar to how Wrongdoers started. But in this case, the vibe is totally different. It's cleaner and almost spacey, but then I guess I can't really call it clean because the opening riff is like really dirty. And Corey kicks the album off officially about a minute in, screaming, "I hope you burn." And just right out of the gate, we see that we were about to get something totally different than what we're used to with this band. And that's kind of an understatement. Now, there's no shortage of heavy songs, right? Like you've got everyone talking over everyone else. Death is a living partner. The close and discontent. And Forever Hurtling Towards Andromeda, which features Sean Ingram from Coalesce. Like these songs are super heavy, you know, they're what you'd expect from Norma Jean. They're screaming, they're loud, they're dissonant, but they're also very technical in places. There's a lot of technical guitar noodling and melodic moments and sort of weird harmonized vocals all over these songs, but it works. It's awesome. And some of the songs get really spacey. They become like this huge spectacle all on their own. Like Synthetic Sun is one of those songs. I think Reaction is an incredibly powerful, big sounding song. But the whole record from start to finish is super experimental in nature. And the closest song we get to a single on this record is the song 1 Million Watts, which has kind of a slower pace and it's got a really iconic chorus, right?
I feel bad that you're angry, but I'm sad.
And as controversial as this song is to some of the Norma Jean fans, it is one of the greatest Norma Jean songs ever written. Like, this song is a masterclass in, yeah, guys, we're going to be a metalcore band, but we can play an incredible, like, hard rock sounding anthem, right? That's what this song is. It's incredible. And the music video has a tornado in it. What more could you ask for? The fifth song is called To the People, and it's another atmospheric track like they've been doing, but this one like ups the creep factor by about 400% because it features the audio from what is called a number station, which, if you don't know what a number station is, it's a mysterious broadcast from like a radio station on like a random frequency, and it's usually like a combination of like numbers and letters and stuff, and it's a secret code. And people have been finding old number station broadcasts for years. And the one on this song is called the Lincolnshire Poacher. It's an actual real number station from the real world, and it's super creepy with its electronic sounding voice and the random combination of numbers. And it's funny because if you watch the video for 1 Million Watts, the band actually has the numbers from the number station above them while they're playing. But if you want to creep yourself out in the middle of the night, go down a rabbit hole on YouTube about number stations, and you can thank me or send me your therapy bills in the morning. But back to the album, there are also some like sort of wacky experimental songs like The Nebula. But then you also have the super epic album closer, The Nexus. And the first time I listened cover to cover, it took like a lot of time for me to process what I'd even heard. Like I had to go back and listen to this record like a whole bunch more times, but I've probably listened to it more than 300 times now since it came out. And I can definitely say that it all works and it all absolutely makes sense, or I have Stockholm syndrome because I love it. And even today, it's hard when I listen to this record not to just start it right back over again. It's just a weird and unique experience in the Norma Jean discography. But it also still has enough elements of like what we love about Norma Jean to keep old school fans engaged. And I know some of this, like, you know, it's sounding different and weird or whatever is probably because, yes, a lot of band members had changed at this point. And when this record came out, none of the original band members from the original lineup were even in the band anymore. And I'll get into my opinion on that at the end of the video, so stay tuned because we still have 2 records to go. 2019, All Hail. So fun fact, this video was originally supposed to be just a deep dive on All Hail all on its own. But when I was writing the script for that video, I realized that it was becoming increasingly difficult to explain my feelings on All Hail without using a bunch of examples from previous Norma Jean albums. So it just kind of like bloated and morphed into what you're watching now. So sorry about that, but All Hail is notably produced by Will Putney, who we all know makes amazing heavy records. And All Hail is no exception to this. And this album is not as alien as the last one was. Similar to what the band had done in the past, this album is kind of a mashup of the old brutal Norma Jean style and the more modern, melodic, and experimental Norma Jean style. But man, they front load this thing with incredibly heavy songs like Mind Over Mind. Safety Last. And Landslide Defeater. And they don't really let up until we get to like the first like really slow song, which is With Errors. And that's not even really that slow, like it still hits hard. And then we have the more hard rock influenced If Lost Then Leader. And the incredibly epic Translational. And in true Norma Jean fashion, there's creepy atmospheric tracks thrown in there like Volunteer Tooth Filing.
What's this thing?
An Extra Dimensional Palette Cleanser. The song Anna features Garrett Russell of Silent Planet and is one of the most gut-wrenchingly emotional songs that I've ever heard. Not just from Norma Jean, but like ever. But much the same way I felt about Wrongdoers in 2013, there's a pretty solid argument out there that All Hail is a perfect Norma Jean record. The recording itself is very dynamic, and the emotional parts of the record hit exactly as intended. And the heavier moments hit so hard that I almost blew out a new pair of speakers in a car stereo that I was installing. Like, I'll be totally transparent here, though. I did not pay as much attention to All Hail as I should have when it came out. It's only been in the last couple of years that it's finally had enough time to bake into my mind. And now I'm able to fully appreciate everything that it has to offer, because this is, again, the band like just not being able to miss. So let's move on to 2022, Death Rattle's Sing For Me. What a crazy year 2022 was. That was the year that I left my old podcast, and I started on a journey that would eventually end up becoming this YouTube channel. This was 20 years of me listening to Norma Jean at this point, and what a reassuring feeling that was, like being able to follow a band that I loved through most of my adult life. But I hope you didn't watch this whole video and expect me to get here and then be like, yeah, this album's just okay, because of course not. We have reached a point in Norma Jean's career where it is impossible for them to put out something that I'm not going to like. On Death Rattle Sing For Me, Norma Jean takes everything that we have heard up to this point and crams it into 53 minutes. The album starts off with the heaviest song, which is called 1994. And while there isn't another song on this record that sounds exactly like this one, except maybe any percent, it comes pretty close. There doesn't seem to be any real distinction anymore between what is or isn't a heavy song on this record. Spearmint Revolt, for example, starts off like with a clear cut, like verse, chorus, verse, but then ends with like a super loud, guttural, clippy breakdown. And then you've got Aria Obscura, which seems like it's going to be a smoother track until it all breaks apart in the middle as well. And then A Killing Word, which is one of my favorites, starts very slow and then likewise descends into madness. The emotional vibe on this record is just all over the place, and honestly, that emotionally is about where I have been for the past 5 years. So I related to this album in a really big way. Sleep Explosion? That song hits unbelievably hard in my car speakers. Like, the bipolar nature of the songs is this album's biggest strength, in my opinion. The songs are also littered with weird sound effects and clips, and it's just really unsettling in places. And in true Norma Jean fashion, they end this album off with an 8-minute epic track called Heartache. All in all, Norma Jean did it again, and I could not have been happier with the result. So, in conclusion, it's crazy to me that I'm still listening to Norma Jean in 2025, and that their 11th album is still making tweaks and improvements to the band's sound. And I know there's already people writing comments about how the band totally died after Bless the Martyr and Kiss the Child, and that the band who released Death Rattle Sing For Me is a cover band of some sort. But like, honestly, that is in such bad faith. Like, it is okay to like old school Norma Jean. I love old school Norma Jean, but I love new school Norma Jean too, because I feel like the constant input and fresh perspectives is really what has kept this band varied and interesting over the past 20 years. Like, in the case of Norma Jean, I've always seen the entity of the band as bigger than its parts or bigger than its individual members. And because of that, I have super, super high hopes at whatever they have cooking in the future. I mean, Death Rattle came out 3 years ago, and I think that we are about due for something new. So Norma Jean, hear me out. Please put another album out soon and make this video obsolete. Make me have to go in and revise it, okay? And real quick, before you guys click off this video, I just wanted to let you guys know that I have recently started a new podcast with my friend Brian Patton, who does a podcast called As the Story Grows. You might know him. And our new podcast is called Casual Metal Podcast. And on that podcast, we talk about new and classic heavy albums from all of the subgenres. There's 6 episodes out now that you can check out if you want. And I'll put a link in the description for this video if you guys want to check that out. If you guys watch this video all the way to the end, I just want you to know that I love you and I appreciate you. Thank you and take care. I will see you all in the next one.